Hi, I'm so excited this afternoon to have somebody I consider my brother from another mother with me. And if you think I am passionate about Africa, well, you haven't met Thebe Ikalafeng yet, because Thebe has been my mentor on this African journey. We've worked together on a number of projects right across the continent. We've spoken together in New York on Africa, and he's just absolutely awesome. His insights and his knowledge and his passion for the African brand always inspires me. So I'm really excited that you're here, Thebe. You were late, but I love you anyway.
I was not late, I was delayed.
Oh, you were delayed,
Yes,
okay.
An African is never late, he's always delayed.
Ah, okay, so you can see he's really
eventually
African.
arrive.
Thebe, you and I have spent, so much quality time across the African continent. And when I look at shaping African conversations, I can't think of a person that has done so much to shape the African conversation. I look at your Instagram and I'm just like, oh my goodness, where is Thebe now? Tell us a little bit about what sort of sparked your interest in Brand Africa?
Well, looking at our continent and looking at how everybody was writing about our continent, but also looking at how the fact that we are not the ones telling the stories of our continent. I think it's Chinua Achebe who once said that until the lion learns how to write its own story, tales of the hunter will always be glorified. Mm-hmm. So I looked at that and I said, why can't we have our own story? Why can't we be our own storytellers? Having traveled when I was in corporate to south of France, to Cannes, to the biggest advertising shows, and I look at the work that wins there. And I said, all the work that wins there is work that is of Western orientation. Even Africans who submit work that is supposed to be about from Africa is shaped around the African narrative. But if you look at people from South America, you look at the French people, look at American people, their work reflected where they come from. And I said to myself, we as Africans need to be our own storytellers. And I have a great opportunity to be able to do that, or great platform to be able to do that. Why can't I take that leap?
Well, it's really interesting. Don't you think the whole idea of the African narrative has become, we've got Africa Rising, we've got, all this, the change in the African story in the last few years. But I think Africa still remains a challenge for investors. It kind of tests an investor's patience, investing in Africa sometimes. If you were looking at investing in Africa, and somebody is watching this that is not from Africa, what would your advice be to them?
Well, somebody asked me that actually at a global company last week. They said to me, what is your advice about doing business or getting into the rest of the continent? I said, you do it with daring caution. Yeah. So, you have to be daring because you really have to be cautious because it's a market you do not know. Cautious but daring because it's a market that requires people who are bold, people who are not, who understand that you have to go there for the long haul, is not for the short haul.
And what works in New York might not work here, right?
Work here. And also understand that if you're going to build a great business in our continent, it's all about partnerships. Remember, the African continent is all about communities. Yeah. It's about relationships.
Collaboration.
So that's collaboration. So that entire philosophy also applies to doing business in a continent. You can't come and do business in Kenya, in Nairobi, in Johannesburg, or in Lagos, or in Cairo, and want to just transplant your business or your ways of doing into the city, into the country. You need to
having local skills is really important.
Local skills is very important. You need to work with the locals because the locals know the roads better. You may know something, you may know your business better, but they know the ways better. So the combination is a powerful combination.
And how do African countries rebrand themselves? Because I think there's been so much that you see on countries where their reputation is not as strong as it should be. So they need their reputations to be strong so that they can attract investors, tourists, and all that. And I know you've rebranded countries before. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's about first starting at the beginning, is to understand what is your point of difference. The challenge that we have as Africans is we all want to sell our countries on the same proposition. We all want, as the Kenyans want to say, come to Kenya for the safari. The South Africans say the same thing. You go to the Ugandans, they say the same thing. You go to Rwandans. We need to find our point of difference. That's first. The second thing, we then need to say, how do we then collaborate as Africans ourselves? So we say, come to Kenya for the safari, go to Johannesburg for heritage, go to, that's how we begin.
But very few companies do that, though. Very few countries do that.
Very few countries do that because they haven't understand the first principle of great branding, which is clarity. Is you need to have a great value proposition. What makes me different from everybody else? Not what makes me better, because you can't compete on better, because better can be bettered.
Yeah, and that's objective. I mean, what might be.
Correct. So rather look at what what makes you different and what is authentic. So you have to compete on what is authentic. You can't compete on something that you cannot sustain.
Yeah,
and you have to be consistent. And you have to integrate all other resources. Now, the challenge in our continent is we tend to work in silos, not just among us countries, but even in country.
We're very territorial.
Very territorial. We're even territorial in a government. So in a government perspective, you go to one department, they see it as territory. They don't see it as all of us connected towards a greater good. So to me, it's clarity. It's authenticity. It is about consistency, and it's about integration.
Don't you think, though, sometimes countries need to build their reputations from the inside first before externally? So, just having that sort of sense of being united as a country, or isn't that important, though?
Well, indeed, that's what clarity starts for. Because I always say, people said it starts with great citizenship first.
Exactly.
Because your own people have to believe in your country and your vision. Now you look at where America is, for example, and Trump has said, we are going to think America first. Africans have to have the same type of orientation. It needs to be Kenya first, South Africa first, Nigeria first, because you have to have that type of orientation and then how do I work with others? Because if you don't have a great sense of self and self-identity, you'll not be able to sell your story, and nobody will be able to buy into your story.
So you see a lot of these campaigns for national country branding, and it's very externally, and they're sort of advertising internationally and all that, but so much needs to be done in their own countries first, right?
But not only that, many of them are not just externally oriented, but many of them actually are just advertising campaigns.
Yeah.
They cannot sustain, they cannot deliver what they promise. They're just based on a marketing campaign.
And it's not holistic.
And it's not holistic.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't start by saying, I want to have a great campaign for Kenya.
Yeah.
What you need to start, you need to say, I need to have a great product in Kenya.
And we haven't identified yet what that product is.
What the product is, and identify what is it that binds Kenyans, for example, what binds South Africans. We always say the greater challenge for the continent as well. People always ask us, what makes you different? What makes you distinctive as a continent? And that problem also manifests itself in the different countries as well. That the countries themselves are struggling to define who they are, because you don't know who you are, you'll not be able to tell your story.
But don't you see that's a challenge when you've got countries, and I mean, we're talking just from a Kenyan perspective, where you're fragmented because of your tribe. So how then do you then start advertising your country externally when actually even within your own country you have the same challenges in South Africa, right?
Correct. Well, difference is actually the African strength. Because we have so many tribes, Kenya so many tribes, South Africa 11, Zambia I think 73 or something, like Nigeria over 200.
Yeah.
There's so many. So tribes should not be what detracts from who we are. Tribes should actually be what strengthens us, because that diversity is actually the one distinctive identity
and we have more in
of
common.
Africa. But we have to focus on what brings us together.
Exactly.
On what is it that makes that's common amongst us.
Because it's more. Yes. We have more in common than differences. Right?
But you can almost blame, if you will, the challenge of colonialism as well. We shouldn't, but one can, because the success of colonialism was divide and rule.
Absolutely.
Divide and conquer. So by dividing Africans even within their own countries into little tribes, or rather overemphasizing the differences between the tribes, has led to us
creating differences.
Creating differences. Yeah. I mean, if you look at countries like Rwanda, the tragedy of Rwanda was just that. When the Belgians and the French and all those emphasized the differences.
Exactly.
and picked one over another. So even in our continent, there's no, if you look at even in Kenya, if you will, there's no greater tribe. There may be bigger numbers, but there is no greater tribe than the other. There is no more valuable tribe. It is just that some tribes are very good at asserting who they are. But what you need to do as a country, as a continent, is we need to assert who we are collectively and focus on that. What the diversity and the differences in the tribes do is they bring the color that nobody else can have.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing also as you go across the African continent. And I know that you and I have also traveled on the continent together at times, and we've had so much fun doing that. But it's just great when you look at, there's an Africanness that keeps all of us together. It's like, there's a warmness, there's a hospitality. I mean, I come to South Africa and, you're my brother. I mean, I wouldn't even think, I don't even have to call you before and say, I just call you, say, Thebe, I'm here. I mean, there's no formality, and I love that. I mean, I go to Nigeria, I have family in Nigeria, go to Ghana, it's just a beautiful thing that Africans have, that we do love each other as Africans, right?
You know, yesterday I was speaking to the president of African Wildlife Foundation, and Sarah, and he was saying the same thing to me. And he was saying, he said, you know, when you travel everywhere else in the world and you see another African, you just and that's it.
Exactly.
You say nothing else.
Yeah.
We acknowledge each other everywhere
absolutely.
else, and we are family. You know, we spoke about earlier. Not only are we see each other as part of a community. Not only do we work together, but we see each other as family, and that is part of what defines who we are.
It really
That's how when
does.
people talk about our continent, they talk about probably two things. But the first thing they talk about is the warmth of the people, how welcoming we are as a people.
Yeah, I mean, I look at my two kids who look at you as their, I mean, you know, you're an inspiration to both of them, and yet, you know, you're not family, but you've become family. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing, because we look at our young ones as ours, as all of ours. You know, it takes a village to raise a child, for sure.
And that's how we were raised.
Yeah,
we were raised that way. We were raised by everybody around you looking after you and looking after your interests. Matter of fact, what's caused a bigger problem in Africa is the degradation of that we are no longer looking at each other that same way.
The extended family.
We are not looking at each other as competition, and we've narrowed down our families into just your mother and your father, whereas before everybody was family, and that's what brought us together.
So did that you lose something the more sophisticated you become, right?
You know, modernization has really messed us up as a people, but it's all up to us. You know?
Exactly.
Our choice is we're the custodians of the next generation. We need to leave something for them.
The other thing, you know, now that we're talking about country branding and politics, do you sometimes think, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, that we place too much emphasis on our political leadership in Africa? Like, we look at them and we have such high expectations of whoever is holding that big office, that, you know, we kind of set ourselves up to failing. And what can we do as Africans to realize that in our own way we can all be leaders and we can all change the narrative of the continent in our own ways?
There's probably two parts to that, and I think the first part is we got confused between traditional leadership and modern political leadership, because I think that there shouldn't be a transition, because those are two parallel or two different ways of leading. So most of us, when you look at our chiefs and all those, we hold them on the pedestal, but the chiefs were very benevolent. They're looking after the communities and looking after the wealth of them. But now the mistake that we've made is that when we brought these people into power, we now moved them not just from how we treated chiefs, now we've made them into demigods. So now they are gods and we bow to them. And now here's the funny thing is, when they're running for politics, when they're running for office, they always come to our homes, they sit in our homes, they eat with us, they walk around.
Just a regular
they have
guys.
no jack, the regular guys, and they promise us that I am here for you, I'm going to do this for you, I'm a public servant and all those. But as soon as they get into power, they are no longer public servants, they are gods. We now bow to them, we now listen to them, and they do whatever they want.
And we treat them as gods. So you know what? So we're reinforcing.
And as a result, we lose the most important objective of having a political leader or a leader, which is he or she is supposed to be a public servant working for us.
And its servant leadership is lost, right?
Because now we are working for them. We are working to keep them in power, and when they're in power, they're working to keep us out of power or out of the benefits of having them in power. I think what we need to do as citizens, as African citizens, we need to reassert ourselves, we need to take back our power, and our power called our vote, is we really need to ensure that these people that we put in power really deliver on the mandate that we've given them. And if we don't, we must withdraw it.
They always say you get the leaders that you deserve, right?
Every country gets a leader it deserves, and we deserve the ones we have because we have not held them to account.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thebe, on talking about something completely different, fashion. And I know that you and I have talked about some of the big major fashion brands coming into Africa and suddenly wanting to have the African backdrop. I think Louis Vuitton did some stuff, and now Valentino's done some stuff. But what is it? What do Africans get out of this sort of African creativity? Are Africans participating in that, or what's
it's quite an interesting one, because Africans get so excited and so you know how we are. We get so worked up when we see an ad with a Kikoi or a Maasai blanket, which has been adopted by Vuitton or by any other brand, or Basotho or any one of those. We get so excited. We say they've appropriated our culture. Well, you sat here with it.
Yeah, exactly.
You sat here with it. You did not put value into it. You know, last night I was talking to somebody about Nyama Mama.
Yeah.
And they said, we don't like this Nyama Mama thing. It's just commercialized our own traditional food. I said, no. They have now taken it up to the next level. They have added value onto it. They say, but you're too expensive. I said, that's the whole idea. When Louis Vuitton made to the Basotho blankets, which in South Africa, for example, we buy for 750 Rand, which is what, $50 or something crazy like that. They then sold it for $3,000. And South Africans went mad. They said, from $50 to $3,000 is the same blanket. How did you do that? It's not the same blanket. Louis Vuitton added value. They upped the quality. They put their stamp.
They put their monogram
on it, and they sold it back to us for $3,000. What we need to do is we need to also celebrate when a Nyama Mama opens up and puts up and sells ugali and Nyama Choma, and they sell it for a higher price. We should be take the ugali and they cut it into a nice little round, a presentable one. Because Africans want to see ugali just all over the plate. We want to see ourselves on the other side of the plate. But what we should be doing is we should be saying, wow, so we are beginning to put value into our own food or into our own products. So that's how we're going to make Made in Africa a really, really success, if we begin to put that value in. So yes, there's a challenge. Is it appropriation or is it appreciation?